time. Many of you arrived early. Thank you so much. It always makes our job a lot easier. We are coming to you, or at least I am coming to you live from St. Martin. A few of our team members are in different parts of the world right now, as are our attendees and panelists. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Andrea Fludiotis. I'm the program manager for the Marine Biodiversity portfolio here at the ResMBID program. For those of you who do not know the acronym, ResMBID is Resilience, Sustainable Energy and Marine Biodiversity. It is a program funded by the European Union and implemented by Expertise France. So I'd like to make a special thank you to everyone who is already here, and of course a special thank you and acknowledgement to our implementing partners, who are of course the 12 Caribbean overseas countries and territories that we are working with to implement ResMBID, the European Union as the donor of our program, who have made this available to finance the required actions. Of course, Expertise France, our headquarters based in Paris, France, who are the lead program implementation partners, and our other partners for ResMBID, the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, and the World Bank. They are our implementing partner with a delegated responsibility for the disaster risk financing and insurance technical assistant component of ResMBID. So just to give you a quick overview of what this event is about, it's really intended to just have a discussion amongst us, all the key stakeholders of ResMBID, particularly in this case, marine biodiversity. This is the first in a series of 6 such events that we are going to have, and it's really aimed at just facilitating a discussion on some of the project ideas that are currently in development or under consideration for ResMBID funding. It's to further strengthen and develop our ResMBID community, and also to identify ideas that could be developed by other OCTs into projects. So today we have a very interesting selection of panelists who I will get to in a moment, who will be able to speak to some of these ideas that are already underway, and will hopefully stimulate some good discussion with us and inspire some further projects. Before we get into that, just a few housekeeping rules, please, if you'll allow me. I'll kindly ask that everyone has their microphones muted when not speaking, so that we can avoid feedback and any background noise. It's of course optional for everyone to keep their videos on or not. For us, it looks much nicer if we can see as many people as possible, but that's at your discretion. I will ask our panelists, if possible, if you could please keep your video on, at least when you are presenting. It does make it easier for us to just capture some of the moments that we'll share today. And of course, we are here to discuss, so please feel free to pose any questions that you might have in the chat box. You can do that during the presentations, or you can use the raise your hand feature during the discussion, and I'll bring in questions as we go along, as I get them in turn. The format of the day will be that I'm going to soon turn to our 4 panelists. Each one of them will have the chance to make a brief presentation for the different projects that they are going to share with us today. So if you wouldn't mind just giving them all a chance to present, and then we'll gather up the questions in the meantime, and we'll deal with them all when we open the floor to the general questions and answers for everybody. If there are no immediate questions, I'll give you a minute for anyone to pose any immediate questions. If not, okay, great. If not, I will move to introducing our fine collection of panelists that have so graciously offered to present for today. First, we have Ms. Ildiko Gilders, who is a policy advisor on nature and environment at St. Martin's Ministry of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Dutch acronym being VROMI. We have Dr. Nicolas Pascal, who is the director of the NGO Blue Finance, and he will be presenting on behalf of the National Trust in Anguilla, whose director unfortunately could not join us today. Thank you very much to Nicolas for stepping in on that. Then we have Ms. Lucy Beagley, who is an Ecosystem Services Advisor at the Joint Nature Conservation Committee. She's based in the UK, but she is one of the leads on one of the projects being developed in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And we have Dr. Gretchen Goodbody Gringley, who is the Director of Research at the Central Caribbean Marine Institute in the Cayman Islands. We are looking forward to all of your presentations, and if I may, I will first call on Ildiko, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off with your presentation, please, and sharing your screen.
All right. Do you see it?
Yes, perfect. Looks great. Thank you.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. So my name is Ildiko Gilders. As Andrea said, I'm a policy advisor to the Ministry of ROMI, to the government of St. Martin. I'm going to present the concept note which we have in development at the moment. The aim is to work towards sustainable and resilient area-based or spatial management of the marine and coastal environment of St. Martin. This is the outline. For those of you that don't know us, we're a constituent country of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and we share our little island with the French overseas collectivity of Saint Martin, which occupies the northern half of our island. But we find ourselves in a rather interesting situation because we are actually one of the most densely populated island countries in the world, and our economy is almost solely reliant on tourism, yet we've never had a comprehensive approach to spatial planning and management. So this has led to a rather unsustainable situation on our island, and this has caused immense pressures on our marine and coastal environments. But there's some good news. Internationally and regionally, the importance of the oceans is increasing. The importance of them is becoming increasingly recognized, as well as the importance of integrating land, sea, and the interchange at the coastal zone. Currently, St. Martin has also signed in 2019 the OCT Declaration of Oceans, which reinforces the commitment to create marine and coastal spatial planning. And currently, we are in the process of developing our very first terrestrial spatial zoning plan. So this is the perfect moment in time to start working on marine and coastal planning to integrate these two plans. So that's why this project was born. It was developed as a collaboration with the St. Martin Nature Foundation, which is a local organization that operates as our designated scientific and management authority for the ecosystems of St. Martin. They do this through an agreement with my ministry, and in this role they conduct research and monitoring. However, they are limited in funding and capacity, and it's the same with my ministry. We are very limited towards policy and planning. So we decided to create this project with two components, one which would go to biodiversity research and the other would go to resilience planning. The Nature Foundation, they would carry out the biodiversity research component, and one of the outputs of this would be the creation of marine and coastal habitat maps. This will be realized through training on boat and equipment handling, through conducting field research for the collection and analysis of data to map and assess the locations and state of marine habitats. For example, they will use drop cameras, and these will be deployed to collect data on the marine environment and can be used to answer questions such as, to what extent are our seagrass fields composed of native or invasive seagrass?
Ildiko, sorry, could I just interject there for a second? I see that a few people are not seeing the slides move. Perhaps you just need to put it in presentation mode and make sure that it's moving through the slides.
It says... Are you seeing a change?
No.
That's unfortunate.
I just saw it now, the slide moved. There we go. Yes. Perfect.
And if I change it now, do you see a change?
Yes, it's changing now. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I think
Sorry.
everyone can see it well. Thank you so much.
Oh, so you didn't see any of the last pictures?
Perhaps you want to go back a couple of slides just to make sure everyone did.
Well, this is the introduction where I talk about St. Martin. I present our unsustainable situation for the marine and coastal environment. This is a little bit about the background, how we're creating our first spatial zoning plans. And we signed the OCT Declaration on Oceans. So basically, this is the perfect moment to combine terrestrial and marine. Introduce the project, and here we are. Can I continue? Okay.
Yes, please. That's great. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, so basically the Nature Foundation will carry out the biodiversity component, biodiversity research component of the project. The capacity gained here will also help them to do more routine and enhanced monitoring of the marine environment. And the other main output of this would be a public awareness campaign, which would which they would design, implement, and evaluate the success of this. And it would be targeted, of course, especially to the marine and coastal environment and the importance of the sustainable management of this. And then we have the resilience planning component, which would be implemented by my ministry, Ministry of Romi. This will have a number of interlinked outputs, mainly starting with the evaluation of the marine and coastal resources. So this could either build upon a previous study done by an intern, and it can also be informed by the habitat maps that will be created by the Nature Foundation. Then we will have a stakeholder assessment done, which will work to identify the major resource users, map them, and then identify potential user conflicts. Then we would like a vulnerability and, a vulnerability and risk assessment, which will work towards identifying, assessing, and prioritizing and mapping all the natural and human-induced hazards in the marine and coastal zone, including any impacts due to climate change. Then we will have an adaptation plan, which will assess adaptation needs. This can also be informed by the vulnerability and risk assessment and can also work towards identifying potential alternative sustainable livelihood options. And lastly, the main and final output would be an area-based spatial management plan. This can be informed by all the other outputs and essentially will set forward the vision and objectives for the marine and coastal environments of St. Martin. So to ensure its actualization and it's not just being a piece of paper, this output will also assess any previous planning efforts to understand what were those bottlenecks and hurdles that they experienced. And so we can actually increase its effectiveness as well as carry out an assessment of our legal framework to identify any necessary policy or legislation that we need to put this into place and then draft these. And a key activity of this output will be the continuous stakeholder consultation. This will ensure buy-in, designate responsibilities, and facilitate the overall implementation of this plan. So if financed, this project will run for about 2 years, but we think it will inform decision-making and planning for an additional 3 to 6 years and beyond. There are a number of expected benefits for the people of St. Martin. We think through increased capacity for enhanced and continued data collection, this will inform sustainable policy, planning, and decision-making. The produced outputs, such as the spatial maps, they will also inform policy-making. And the people of St. Martin, they will benefit from an increased resilience to natural disasters as a result of this improved policy and planning. And this will, of course, also increase the resilience of the economy by increasing the resilience of coastal tourism infrastructure, but also by identifying potential alternative sustainable livelihood options. And further benefits will be through the improvement of public awareness, which, as we know, also increases the resilience of the people of the island. Potential benefits for the region include an increased understanding of our marine environment and any impacts due to climate change. Lessons learned can also be translated to the other islands on any of their similar initiatives. And also any nominations of marine protected areas will benefit regional marine biodiversity as a whole. So thank you very much for this opportunity and listening to my presentation. It's been an honor to be included in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a really great presentation. Thank you. If I could move next to Nicolas, please. We can hear you and see you. Good.
Okay, it's good. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicholas. I'm the ED of Blue Finance, Social Enterprise. I will share my screen now. Just 1 second. And that should be working.
Yes, if you want to just put it in a full screen mode, and then we can see it there.
I don't have access still to the screen. One second. Okay. So meanwhile, my screen come back. Okay, it's going back. So here we're going to present you a project about developed for Anguilla. It has been led by the Anguilla National Trust. So my presentation is not coming. So I don't know if you can see it. So I will. I don't know.
I can see the slide. It's not in full screen, but I can see the slide.
Okay, let me try to go back. Okay. We should be perfect now, correct?
I see you clicked on something. Let's just give it a second.
Is it moving?
No.
Okay.
If you want, I can bring it up on my side and I can just move through the slides for you if you want.
I think there's always something between this and I'm a Mac user, and there's always some issues. Okay, so can you see this? Can you see the screen now? I just want to avoid you the harassment of moving the slides. Is always annoying.
So okay, so we can see it now. Thank you.
Okay, so tech number 2. So I'm presenting, and I want this to be very clear, I'm presenting on behalf of the Anguilla National Trust. This is a project where Blue Finance has participated, but I would say our participation was remote and sporadic and very punctual on one aspect of a project. So this project, I'm talking really on behalf of this project leader, a wonderful partner, the Anguilla National Trust, developed also with the government of Anguilla. So very quickly, we will go through the project proposal. So very classic. We get to see the objectives, the background, and a little bit what is planned in terms of activities and partners and how we're going to do it. So the objective is quite straightforward. We want really to improve the management of the Anguilla's marine park system and benefit, obviously, indirectly, all the marine biodiversity, coastal resiliency, coastal communities, and the blue economy sector. So as a keyword here is really improving the management and improving the effectiveness of the MPAs or marine parks. More precisely, so we're going to go and develop and implement a sustainable co-management structure for Anguilla's marine parks. This is something that has been developed in other Caribbean countries and worldwide, and we think it's quite adequate for Anguilla. I will come back to this. The idea is also to build all the national capacities for the planning and management of the marine parks in collaboration with a co-management entity, but it is still a co-management. So we have to build some very technical skills and scientific capacities from both sides, government and co-management entity, and obviously to raise public awareness and cooperation about the MPA and more generally about marine spatial planning in Anguilla. One aspect important beside this is we know also that most of the MPAs today are facing some financing gap. So beside the designation, beside the regulation and a marine plan, a marine spatial plan, or management plan, usually there's always a financing gap to implement it. There's not enough resources, there's not enough staff, there's not enough budget. So we're going to work also from the very beginning on a plan to create tangible and innovative revenue mechanisms for the marine parks, for the MPS, okay? So basically, we will look at nature-based tourism, blue carbon, any kind of blue economy sector linked to sustainable fishery and other kind of payment for ecosystem services. I will be very happy to answer any question if we go back later. So the background of this, so really this project is building on lessons learned from other projects. One of them is the Darwin Plus project. That was also focusing on the management, but this time not on the whole network, but on a specific MPA. And the idea is that we learn, or they learn through this project exactly what was missing and what has to be enhanced. So the idea is to use what has been learned there for this project. So in particular, we learn how to manage the multi-stakeholder approach for the management and how to make it more collaborative towards a co-management approach, for example, with a planning committee. There was a clear management plan that has been consensualized with most of the partners. And it was almost agreed that the approach has to be upscaled, okay? And so that's why this project, Resembid, has been designed. So very quickly, we're dealing here with 6 MPAs that have been designated. Obviously, they are fulfilling the role of protecting critical nearshore and marine habitats. They also have some protection towards endangered species and act also as a replenishment zone for fisheries or protecting some of the fishery spawning stocks. There's also designed to support the coastal tourism industry in a sustainable way. And we will come back to this. And they provide also other ecosystem services, e.g. coastal protection, for some of the landowners that are in the front line on a beach side, okay? So the main approach that what we have learned also from previous project is that there's a gap in management of this side. So we have to focus both on the science and the governance, but we have also to focus on the management and the financial side, okay? So we need to provide a system where the parks and the network can become a little more self-financing and not depend so much on the subsidies from government, but might depend on political agenda. So that's the idea. And obviously all of this has been discussed with government. So our approach that we want to implement through Resembid and with other partners is really to work towards a co-management with the government. So to design with them, we have several options in co-management. One can go to a full delegation to something much collaborative. So there are several spectrum and gradients that we have to work together with government. We will base our approach on existing success stories of co-management that we have in the region, where Blue Finance has participated, but others where it has been already there for many years. And I think we have people around the table here that can share part of these models of co-management between government and the local non-profit entity. And the idea is once we have this co-management entity established with a clear mandate or clear mission, is to structure a business model that will allow to attract upfront capital from blended finance solution for the MPA. Okay, this is what Blue Finance has developed in the other countries where we are working, e.g. in Belize, e.g. in Dominican Republic and in Philippines. And it's exactly the same approach, a co-management for the MPA, a tangible business model, working with government, obviously, and we can bring some upfront financials coming from donors and investors to finance the upfront capital. This activity will be implemented through 6 different approaches. I will not go through, it's maybe a bit too scholarship, but basically there will be a science and ecological preparation for the project. So just to be sure that we know our context, both ecological and socioeconomic, there will be a clear focus on the design and the legal arrangements with government for the collaborative management, for the co-management agreement, and also working with all the stakeholders. It has to be obviously something bottom up. And after this, work all together on the business plan and the business model for the MPA to become financially sustainable. We use the word on purpose business model. I know it can be a bit choking to talk about business model for an MPA, but here really the idea is we want the MPA to have some capacities, internal capacities as a social entrepreneur to be more self-financed. So to work with tourism, to work with fishers, to work with aquaculture, and to develop some revenues in the long term for the MPA. And for that, we can also structure some clear blended finance solution for the MPA. Who? Main partners, and I think there will be more during the process, but the main partners of this project is led by the Fishery and Marine Resource Unit, so government and the DNR. The Anguilla National Trust, I think, has been the main champion behind all this. It's a very interesting body, so it's a statutory body. So already recognized by a legal act by cabinet in 1988. They have already the mandate to protect and manage part of the Anguilla's natural heritage. So now the idea is maybe to convert it into some more concrete co-management arrangement, the same as we have in Bahamas or in other islands, for example. Blue Finance, very quickly, as I mentioned, we are a social enterprise. We develop this kind of solutions for MPS. So we work very closely with government, local partners to structure this co-management arrangement, and also the business approach and the blended finance solution. Okay, and the support that we're asking to resubmit is approx $500,000. And I thank you very much for inviting the project to present, and I hope it was quite clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolas. Very informative. Thank you very much. If I may call on Lucy to please share her screen next, and we can jump across to the Turks and Caicos Islands for our next project.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. I'll just share my screen.
Here we go. Yes,
I can see that.
That's perfect. Thank you. Yes.
Great, thank you. So in this presentation, I'll be talking to you about our proposal called Defining a Post-COVID-19 Resilient Recovery in the Turks and Caicos Islands, Sustainable Finance and Investment in the Future of the Islands' People and Environment. So I work for the Joint Nature Conservation Committee. We're a UK government agency, but this proposal has been developed in very close collaboration with the Turks and Caicos Department of Environment and Coastal Resources, and our partners will also be the Turks and Caicos National Trust, Invest Turks and Caicos, and the TCI Fishing Cooperative. I should perhaps say at the start that this proposal we're making to the COVID-19 response facility, but there are very strong environmental elements to this project and aligns very closely with this marine biodiversity theme, which we're discussing today. So in this short presentation, I'm going to take you through the rationale and the background for the project, the key project activities, and then finally just touch on the regionality and the transferability of this project to the rest of the region. So the rationale and the background for this project was acknowledging that as many countries around the world have seen, that COVID-19 has left many in TCI unemployed. So an online survey that took place in TCI in August of last year found that 55% of people had lost their jobs due to the closure of the economy. There had been a 59% drop in individual incomes and a 91% drop in small business incomes. And another study that looked at countries across the world found that TCI had lost 9.2% of its GDP, and this was the highest loss of any country due to impacts on tourism. So TCI government have recognised that economic diversification, moving away from a high reliance on tourism, is essential for a resilient recovery long term. But then whilst TCI and many others are faced with these economic challenges, there's still a financing gap for the environment. And in TCI, there isn't a long-term conservation funding mechanism to support and maintain a resilient natural environment. So TCI previously had a conservation fund, which in 2005 to 6 generated over $3 million for environmental management activities, and that was collected through an accommodation tax. But due to various reasons, that fund was dissolved, but there's real political will in TCI to look at reinstating this conservation fund to have that long-term mechanism. So with all of this in mind, we wanted to design a project that considered the economic impacts of COVID-19, but really interlinked this with social and environmental resilience as well, and design a project that looks at economic diversification, but also sustainable livelihoods and investment in the natural environment. So the key activities for this project is that we would start by trying to build the knowledge base and really understand the effects of COVID-19. So we would conduct a socio-economic monitoring survey that looks at the impacts of COVID-19 by sector and demographics and understand who has been most impacted, what skills do they have, and how can we build on those skills for a resilient recovery. We'd conduct an environmental impact survey to understand how COVID-19 has both positively and negatively affected the environment, and also a business attitude survey. And the intention of that would be to understand from businesses how they see their impacts and dependencies on the environment, and through that start to think about investable activities. So particularly building on that business attitude survey, we would hope to produce a TCI natural capital investment plan. So in that plan, we would identify the opportunities, the risks, the motivations for investing in natural capital. So it could be something that businesses can pick up and relate to their own sectors and activities, and identify those different pathways to investment. Because different work has been taken place in TCI about the economic value of the environment, but we really want to take that a step forward and turn all that knowledge into action. Through this project, we would also establish a TCI community hub, and that hub would provide training and professional development opportunities in support of a resilient recovery. We would deliver this community hub in 2 phases. The first phase would really build on that socioeconomic monitoring survey and provide opportunities for those who have been most impacted by COVID-19. And then in the second phase, start to look towards what's coming through from the investment plan and make sure that there are the type of skills needed to take up things such as green jobs, or the type of activities that are coming through as investable opportunities. And overall, this community hub, we would look to train at least 150 people across the island, and we'd also adopt a train the trainer approach, so that not only are people given the skills themselves, they also have the tools and the mechanisms to be future trainers and facilitators, so that the skills are really retained on island. And lastly, we would also look to further the reinstatement of the TCI Conservation Fund. So, as I said, there's real political will for the reinstatement, but there are challenges about the ring fencing of the fund and how it would be administered. So we would look to try and unpick that and have some tangible solutions. So overall, we would hope that the impact of the project is that TCI has the long-term skills and investment streams to support a post-COVID-19 resilient recovery that is economically, social and environmentally resilient. So lastly, just to think about the regionality of this work, in November of last year, JNCC, we held a workshop on a post-COVID-19 resilient recovery that was attended by 11 of the UK OTs. And through that, all attendees expressed a concern about how do you kickstart economies without compromising the environment. And a particular concern was expressed for sectors such as tourism and fisheries. And I think that this idea of building back better or a green recovery is something that lots of different countries are discussing, and I'm sure the OCTs represented today are also considering as well. So I think there are really lessons to be learnt on how we could do this, and the project we've proposed could be a model that is transferable to other islands as well. And much like we just heard from Nicola and Anguilla on sustainable finance, which was great to hear about, Caribbean islands do have a very strong economic dependence on their ecosystems. So they're really ideal places to consider sustainable finance mechanisms. So there's real learning that we can do through this project and others. I think the Dutch OCTs have been thinking about sustainable finance mechanisms, and certainly if this project goes ahead, there's a lot that we could learn from the Anguilla project if that does as well. So real synergies there. So thank you very much to Rezenbid for the opportunity to present today. Very happy to answer questions afterwards, and if there's any questions, you could get in contact with Lamika Williams at the Department of Environment and TCI, or also my colleague Matt Smith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Much appreciated. Thank you all for your attention so far. We've got one more panelist to go, Dr. Gretchen Goodbody, who's waiting to present. She's just off another presentation, so firing on all cylinders today as usual, Gretchen. Just a reminder to everyone, we've heard some very interesting presentations already, so if you have any questions that come to mind, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll address them after Gretchen's presentation when we open the floor. Thank you. Over to you, Gretchen.
Thanks, Andrea. Just please let me know if my slides also don't move forward. Hopefully that won't be an issue. So I'm going to talk to you all today about my project that we're developing at CCMI, which is the Central Caribbean Marine Institute, that looks at the resilience of coral reefs, and particularly corals that we're growing in our nursery facility in situ off of Little Cayman Island. And for reference, Little Cayman is a very small island just northeast of Grand Cayman. It has less than 100 permanent residents on the island. And we at CCMI have been conducting continuous surveys for over 20 years of the reef health around Little Cayman, and have found that it has remained relatively stable around 22 to 25% coral cover for the last 20 years. So this really makes Little Cayman an ideal place to have a coral nursery and to study the capacity of coral nurseries to facilitate in resilience and building resilience of our coral reef communities. So just a bit of a presentation outline. I'll first begin with some project background and the basis for why we have coral nurseries and the current efforts incorporating coral nurseries and outplantings, and how we at CCMI are modifying those and finding differences in our results. And that will lead directly into this particular project in terms of the aim and the goals. And I'll finally wrap that up with what we feel the impacts of the project will be moving forward. So for the background, I'm sure we're all familiar with the trajectory of coral reefs, and particularly that has happened in the Caribbean over the last several decades. And this has been particularly pronounced with our staghorn and elkhorn coral species, the acroporids, where we had a large decline in the late 1970s associated with an outbreak of white band disease. And this has been exacerbated by continuous bleaching associated with global climate change. The result of this is that we have lost our once extremely diverse and abundant shallow reef ecosystems that were dominated by acroporid corals. And here in Cayman, they're now representative of these images in the top right corner, where we refer to it as a hard pan environment. And previously, this would have been completely covered with Acropora palmata and Acropora cervicornis. So because of this, many scientists have looked to ways that we can rebuild these communities of acroporid corals in the shallow ecosystems around the Caribbean. And restoration is certainly not a new technique. We have been working on restoration in corals for over a decade now. In fact, I began working in restoration in the just in my postdoc at Mote Marine Lab in 2010. So this has been something that has been a passion for me, and we've been working towards developing better techniques for quite a long time. And so at present, there are a few different mechanisms that we use in our coral nurseries for growing corals. I mean, this is really gardening for coral reefs. And we can do this with what we call our hanging nurseries, which would be the picture in the bottom left. So this is what we have on Little Cayman. So you can see that we're growing primarily Acropora cervicornis in our nursery, and they do have very fast growth rates in the nursery, and we're able to then outplant those onto the reef, as you can see in the picture on the far right. Another mechanism that's often used are these standing coral nurseries. So this is in the Florida Keys. And you can see in this image that we can, in fact, just grow them either standing up on these props or hanging in our nursery. But of course, the ultimate goal of a coral nursery is to eventually replant them out onto the substrate and rebuild these communities that we've lost as a result of disease and climate change. And the success of those strategies varies among locations. And we feel that probably one of the main implications for that success is the habitat quality, which is another reason why we feel that conducting these studies and experiments in Little Cayman, where the anthropogenic impact is so much smaller than in many other locations, we can get a better idea of, what are the proper methods for outplanting that can then be utilized regionally and more widespread. One of the mechanisms that we have tried recently is using these small domes that elevate our outplanted corals off of the seafloor. So you can see that we fragment corals from our hanging nursery, and then we attach them with zip ties to these rebar structures that are weighted onto the seabed. This brings those corals that we're outplanting slightly away from the seafloor. It seems to result in less predation or impact from things like ciliates, less competition with macroalgae. And as a result, what we're finding are quite high survival rates for these corals that we're putting out onto domes, on the order of 80 to 90% survival 6 months to a year after outplanting. And so we are looking to scale this method up. And one of the questions we have is, do the corals that we have growing in our nursery have a variable resilience moving forward to the impacts that they will experience when they're outplanted onto the reef? And can we somehow select specific individuals from our nursery in order to create a more robust outplanted population? And so this brings us to the project that we are proposing to Resembid, in which we are looking to select individuals that we identify as potentially having a higher resilience capacity. So to do this, we will use our previous data in which we had a white band outbreak come through our nursery. We have corals that got white band disease and survived. And we also have corals that did not ever show symptoms of white band disease, despite being next to corals that did have white band disease. So we have these two different categories of what we're calling disease resilience. So contracted the disease and survived, or were resistant to the disease in the first place. And so we will select those to incorporate into our study. And the other component that we will include is thermal tolerance. So we're looking at how do individual corals from our nursery respond differentially to a range of temperatures. And we will do this in a laboratory setting, which I've tried to exemplify here in my infographic. So we take a small fragment of the colonies from our nursery, we bring them into the laboratory in these closed chambers, and then we measure their oxygen metabolism over time across a range of temperature. And what this shows us is what we see in this little graph cartoon on the bottom here, is we expect that we will find some individuals that have a higher temperature threshold than other individuals. And so this would categorize these individuals into high or low temperature tolerance. And that would, again, enable us to construct these communities that we're outplanting with variable numbers of high, low temperature tolerance or disease resilience capacity. And the goal is then to say, is what we're measuring in the lab, does that actually result in realized resilience when we outplant these populations back onto the reef? And of course, we are hypothesizing that this is going to be the case, that we're going to find that the corals we're finding with higher resilience to temperature in the lab or higher resilience to disease from a past exposure will have higher survival and growth in the long term. So after we complete our selection of our colonies, we will then outplant them onto the domes in arrays of 10 domes, like you see in the picture on the right. And we will compare their growth and survival and presence of disease and presence of bleaching over time to see if, in fact, we can create more resilient communities moving forward. And so what we think the output of our 2-year project will be, primarily this will build the research capacity at CCMI, because we will bring in some experts to assist with the thermal tolerance experiments, and we will participate in workshops specific to restoration and making sure that we are up to speed with the most current techniques. It will provide the expertise to conduct the proposed experiments through those activities I just mentioned. It will improve our restoration strategies moving forward, so that we know how we can build these more resilient communities and improve the success. And then we can share this with other locations that are also doing coral nursery and outplanting work, and hopefully impact the regional success of coral restoration projects. And finally, of course, if we do find that we can build these more resilient populations, it will help to sustain the biodiversity of our reefs here in Cayman, and hopefully regionally promoting resilience of coral reefs long term. And so thank you for having me today. If you would like to have any more information about these types of projects we're working on, you can always feel free to contact me. Thanks.
Thank you, Gretchen. Very informative. Thank you very much. Thanks again to all 4 of you. I think those were great presentations as expected. I know that I'm just looking at our participants list, and I know that we have quite a few participants who are either already working on projects along these lines, or are busy formulating some project ideas along these lines. So I'd like to open the floor to questions right now. I see that we received already a couple in the chat box. So I think let's kick off with those. And then we can open the floor to everyone else who wants to. If you can just use the raise your hand feature, then it'll let me see who's coming in order, and we can deal with them from there. I know, for example, we have some stakeholders from Aruba who are in the audience today, and I know that they might want to speak to some of these project ideas as well. But we'll kick off first with Matt Smith. Matt, you had a question for Nicolas. Nicolas, the question is, to what extent is revenue generation from MPAs expected to be based upon extraction value versus non-extractive revenue / value creation?
Okay, thank you for the question. I would say, being quantitative, I would say 90% will be non-extractive, and maybe 10% linked to extractive activities. We are really exploring ways how MPAs can benefit sustainable fisheries or any kind of responsible aquaculture. So we're very much in the beginning of this revenue stream. So I think so far we're concentrating, obviously, with a COVID context on some specific approach with nature-based tourism, blue carbon, and also payment for ecosystem services, so which are all non-extractive. Okay, I want also to mention that with COVID, we have developed also some very specific approaches, mitigation approaches, focusing on national tourism, focusing on nature-based tourism, which is a bit high-end or different approach and different market niche. And we have also developed other kind of strategies with blue carbon. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nicolas. Matt, did you have any follow-up question to that, or comments that you wanted to raise before we move to the next question?
No, thank you, Andrea, and thank you very much for the answer. That was it's very useful to know. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Our second question that we have is for Ildiko. Question is, will the spatial planning be able to address existing planning retrospectively, or will the project outputs mainly be focused on informing new and future interventions and activities? And has this been well received by stakeholders or seen as more red tape?
Okay, so I guess it's also something that the project will work to figure out. On the coast speaking, there is already a lot of construction, so it would have to evaluate to see what of that can be replanned. For example, if land is in long lease, you can get the lease up within a certain amount of years, so it would be trying to make a plan for the long term to see where can we make changes, and where can we plan for that. For the marine environment, we don't have any planning there formally just the marine park, so that's quite open. It will be mostly focusing on the coastal area, how we can make this plan work based on what is already there. Has it been well received by stakeholders? Yeah, mostly NGOs. Is very well received by, and we are working now with the Maritime Department to ensure that they are also on board, because environment and maritime affairs are in two separate ministries, so we have to work together to make sure that we are on the same line. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I believe that question was from Matt as well. Matt, any follow-up to that?
No, just as I said in the chat, you said thanks very much. That sounds really, really positive. So that's great. I look forward to watching that with interest.
Great. Well, yeah, as I said at the beginning, the purpose here really was for us to share some experiences and ideas on, projects that are being developed for ResImbid funding. I think, the panelists that we've had today, they've given us a really good overview on some of the key areas that projects are being developed for. I know that some of these are quite common to other OCTs as well, and that we have some project ideas being developed by that on those themes. So I'd like to open the floor now to any of our panelists. I won't call you out by name just yet, but if we have anyone who would like to perhaps learn a bit more, from our panelists on their experience on developing these proposals, or perhaps we can facilitate a bit of a discussion, since we're all in the room, to see what the potential would be for regional or sub-regional collaborations. So yeah, without singling anyone out right now, I'd like to just open the floor to anyone who'd like to raise their hand and maybe speak to some of these points.
I can speak to that, Andrea. I found that we had some growing pains with the initial development of our proposal for ResImbid, but we had a lot of feedback from Andrea and Catherine that was extremely helpful. So they both really walked us through, what they want, what was expected, and how to fill out the application form. It seemed that the group as a whole from ResImbid really wants to make sure that our projects move forward. And so they were very constructive in helping us in that way. I would say probably the biggest hurdle to us in terms of writing our proposals or moving our proposal forward was actually getting the government to sign off for the final approval. Took a lot longer than we had anticipated. So there were a lot of meetings and conversations and some compromises to make sure that our proposals did in the end get that the thumbs up to move forward to the next stage. And so we're really pleased that we're finally at that point.
Thank you, Gretchen. Yeah, just a couple of points on that, if I may. You mentioned Catherine, and for those of you who do not know her, Dr. Catherine Jadot, who is our external expert on marine biodiversity. She's an integral part of the ResImbid team. A lot of you on the call will probably know her already, either from calls that we've had together with her on developing project ideas, or perhaps many of you have worked with her before, and I see she's about to pop into our screens. So you all know what she looks like. There we go, there's Catherine. Thanks for joining. Catherine has been instrumental in guiding a lot of our project stakeholders in developing, especially the technical aspects of their projects. Her experience is really vital in this regard. And of course, is available to everyone who engages with us to develop the projects, because Catherine and I are developing the projects, together as we go with all the partners. So please do make use of us as much as possible. We are, as Gretchen said, we are indeed doing our very best to make sure that all projects can advance. So Yeah, just and on that point as well, just to reiterate that none of the projects that you've heard about today have been funded yet. The project idea that we heard from TCI, it has just received quite recently approval to move ahead from a concept note stage to the project document stage, so that is advancing. And we are working continuously in the background to advance all the projects as many as possible and as quickly as possible. So we do really appreciate everyone's efforts in that regard. I see we do have a few minutes left. So if we have anyone else from the panel who'd like to join in, or perhaps at this moment I could bring in, give our program director, Fabian McKinnon, a chance to chime in as well, having heard all the presentations and a lot of the presenters as well. We can hear a word or two from him as well before we move to start closing up.
Cheers, Andrea. Thank you very much. Welcome everyone again. As I think everybody understands, but perhaps it bears highlighting that the purpose of this is the first one, but the purpose of these meetings, of these get-togethers, is not to go into depth technically, but it's to share approaches, solutions, initiatives, strategies, so that further in-depth reflection or replication, as the case may be triggered following. So these sessions are very intentionally pitched that way to make them accessible to all. Many on the call are senior in their own area, but not necessarily scientists, and not necessarily environmental management specialists. So we will be holding more of these on renewable energy, on resilience, possibly on the COVID-19 facility and the sort of very creative responses that the region has had through our facility. So it's great to get this conversation going. Really, that's what it's about. And I'd like to again thank the panelists for sure, all the other participants, and thank you, Andrea, for as always a very work full of good energy and light. We need lots of that. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Fabian. Yeah, if we don't have any other questions before closing, I'd like to also just again say a very special thank you to our panelists for making the time and the effort to present. It's very much appreciated. I'd also like to thank all the rest of our team who helped us set this up today, especially my colleagues Susan Branca-Green, Dante, Olivia, and of course our communications manager, Jamal Brown. They've all been instrumental in making sure that this all works as planned and that everyone was informed about it, and of course helping me to prepare for it. So very much appreciated to all of you. Thank you. And of course, again, Fabian, our fearless leader steering the ship, who you all know very well. I see Oriana has come into our picture here. Oriana is one of our stakeholders in Aruba. We know her very well by now. Lots of activity happening in Aruba. So Oriana, I know you. I said I would give you a chance, but now since you've popped into the screen, I don't have to embarrassingly single you out. I know that you have a few projects going on that relate very closely to some of these projects. So if you wanted to have a word on this, please feel free to jump in now.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this initiative. It's wonderful to hear about what other islands are planning for their marine resources. Here on Aruba, it has been challenging, yes, due to limited human resources to set up these project concept notes. But it's fascinating to get some of the information that you guys have provided It also provides more information to more stakeholders locally on the possibilities that there are with this fund. I think that for Aruba, we have many small NGOs that they work in their environmental compartments. And it has been also a challenge to try and synergize these projects into an integrated national plan. So in that respect, for us, it has been challenging to get some of the projects off the ground, although we have been able to at least propose, for instance, a project on a coral reef facility to outplant corals. That's because we have an NGO called Scubble Bubbles Foundation that already is growing corals. They already have coral replantation projects on the island, and they are trying to expand their efforts in collaboration with the tourism industry. So this is a cooperative approach where we are also stimulating the tourism industry to invest more into the marine resources and their conservation. So that's what I can say for now. I think yesterday I handed in one more project, but I'm not going to mention that as of yet. Maybe in the next round we could talk about that when it's a bit further down feedback sessions, I would say.
Thank you, Ariana. Thank you. Yes, we are looking forward to developing a lot more ideas. Right. I don't see any other...
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
I found it very interesting to see that most of the presentation started with a picture from Aruba. So
I was not responsible for that. I don't know if that's true.
Yes,
but,
that's an iconic picture.
Well, it was in the lucky draw then. We had to draw straws to see which picture we would use in the template. So that was all very fortuitous. It was not intentional.
Well, thank you anyway for
Great. Right, so I don't see any other questions in the chat box or any raised hands. Just an earlier question about sharing of the presentations. That's actually why we recorded the session. So the recording will be available to everyone, so you can see the presentations and hear what was behind them. If you do want any more information on what was presented, please feel free to get in touch with me or the panelists who shared their information, and we'd be happy to facilitate that further. I'd like to thank once again everyone who participated, of course, all of our partners in the 12 Caribbean OCTs, those who joined and those who could not today. Of course, once again, our donor, the European Union, Expertise France, and our partners at the World Bank and the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery. Thank you for all of you for spending your time with us today, and we do look forward to connecting with you on this again soon. Fabian, did you have any closing words before we go?
No biblical statements, just to wish you all well in your wonderful work, and do know that as Gretchen extremely graciously noted, sometimes we don't mean to terrorize you with concept notes and some such, but it's in the interest of laying the foundations. It's an investment, really, laying the foundations for a project document that is solid and well founded, so to maximize the chances of success. We're not in the business of ticking boxes. That's really what we're after. The development is tough on a good day, so we really need to do, within the limits of pragmatism, all we can to make sure we move forward on solid ground, and we make a difference for the people and the environments of the OCTs. This is not, by the way, the mother of all sessions in marine biodiversity. We will continue to have these as we move through the process. As I said, the energy and resilience, but then we'll have another one as our portfolio of projects further develops, and as the projects materialize and get formalized and so on, to say nothing of when we move to implementation, and there will be good solid feedback stories from the ground. So let's stay in touch, as it were, and we will hope keep expanding this community so that we can maximize the exchange and the cross-fertilization. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good afternoon and evening, and we will be speaking with you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.